This is Work University, episode 34. This is Work University, and I'm Annalisa Felix. This is where I interview people from various employment backgrounds and get the inside scoop on what their job is really like. If you're just getting into the workforce, or if you're curious about getting into something new, listen up. Hello, today I am talking with Lucia Galardo Johnson, and Lucia is a professional mediator in Southern California. Welcome, Lucia.
Thank you, Annalisa. I'm really delighted to be with you this evening.
You are a mediator? What does that mean?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, a mediator is a person who serves as a neutral. What I mean by that is we're not judges, we're not attorneys, but we work with individuals, or what we call parties, to help them come up with some problem-solving solutions to resolve any problems that it might have. It comes in several formats. It can be a community dispute, it could be something in the legal world, or it could even be something within HR or a corporation in which a professional who can listen and help support the needs and interests of the party so that they can come to some kind of agreement is what we're all about.
That is a great summarization. Now, do you have to be a lawyer to be a mediator?
That's another good question. In my particular profession, you do not, though there are many attorneys who have decided to immerse themselves into the world of mediation. Many attorneys have decided that they no longer wanted to be litigators, where they just go in and fight individually, but like the idea of creating kind of a balanced dialogue between their two parties. For myself, I actually went the community mediation route. I do not have a background as an attorney, but rather I come to it with a master's degree in family and human development, and my area of expertise happens to be in family mediation.
So do you find that there are many different backgrounds that come to mediation?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I have several colleagues that have come to this profession based upon their long-term experience in a previous profession. For instance, I have people who have worked in human resources and have decided to become mediators for their various corporations. I have met individuals that were in employment law and decided to become a mediator with regards to employee relations. I've also met some people in nonprofits who have decided to take skill programs in mediation so that they can help support their organization and how they interact with the community.
Okay, you've been a mediator in Southern California. It sounds like maybe a few different regions. Do the qualifications differ from region to region or often to office to office?
That's a very good question. I would say it varies more in role versus role. For instance, I received my training from Loyola Law School Center for Conflict Resolution, and this is a program that falls under what is called DERPA. DERPA standing for the Dispute Resolution Programs Act. Most organizations that I have worked for ask for that particular qualification. It just means that you've received 40 hours or more of professional training as a mediator. And then what happens is the various locations that I've worked at would ask for a minimum or advanced training in the art of mediation. And if you have this DERPA standard behind you in your education profile, it usually helps a lot more with your various jobs. So, for instance, when I work at the courts, there's a certain level of expertise that they're looking for versus when I work in community programs or even when I worked in my private practice. It just depends on the focus with regards to mediation, but I would say the underlying thread with it all is just remaining that third-party neutral to help problem solve.
So are there any situations where you have to be like a witness type in a court of law to be there and work in the court?
That is a very good question. We don't work as witnesses or court clerks. We're actually an independent entity. What happens, like what I'm doing recently, I'm working for Kern County Superior Court. My employer is actually the Better Business Bureau. They are the contractors for the courts and supply them with professional mediators to take care of a variety of issues. For instance, we have someone on our staff that deals with small claims. We have somebody else that deals with landlord-tenant disputes, unlawful detainer, and even civil harassment cases. As for me, since my area of expertise centers around family, I do family law and I do probate. So it just kind of depends on what your background is, and then they will place you in the appropriate slot. There are some people who have actually gotten formal master's degree in conflict resolution, and so when they graduate, they're looking for this particular profession in order to, provide their skills and expertise in these areas.
Okay, so you can work for yourself, or you can work for like a mediation company where that's where all you'd be doing, right?
That's another good question. It's a newer profession in this respect, that for the longest time, most mediators did come in through the legal profession. Then there were mediators like myself that were trained through the community mediation model. We all tend to practice what is called classic or traditional mediation, where we're helping the two parties find solutions to their own problem and to be able to be active participants in problem resolution. In some counties, many mediators are there as volunteers. In others, like where I am now, they contracted with an organization to provide them mediation services. And then there are individuals that do independent contract work. For instance, prior to my move here to the Kern County Superior Court, I had a private practice in which I was already working with families in human dynamic situations. And so I just brought in my mediation skills to help problem solve and unite families in any situations, like if they're having issues with their children or couple support. I would use my mediation skills to assist with that. So there's a variety of avenues that one can go with regards to mediation skills. But for the most part, I would say the bigger categories are doing work at court, being self-employed, or volunteering time in some of the counties here in Southern California.
So if I were looking to get into this as a career, what could I expect the pay range to be like, across the board, beginning, and then what's the most that you've seen with a lot of experience?
Okay, that's another good question. And it's a very wide-ranged question. As I mentioned, there are folks that are volunteering, gaining hours of experience, so obviously that is gratis. And then there are some attorneys who have changed their mindset from litigant work to mediation work, and that can be up into the six figures. There's obviously median range depending on the county or the groups that you're working for. But I would say it'll be whatever direction you'd like to go in. And time. I would always share with everyone, make sure you just pace yourself and give yourself time, because the more experience you have in this profession and the more you become an expert in a particular field, usually the more lucrative this business starts to become. Because for a lot of individuals looking for mediation services, they need to work with somebody that, A, first of all, they can really trust, and B, someone who has some knowledge in a particular category. For instance, I've met mediators. I know I mentioned employment law, for instance. I've met a mediator who is doing quite well because he's an expert in franchise law. Basically, he had owned a franchise himself for many years and then decided to become a mediator for that world. I think I mentioned earlier individuals that were in human resources that flipped over into being mediators in that particular profession. So the one thing I guess I would suggest is, if you're trying to look at this as a career option, is similar to myself and a few others, don't reinvent the wheel. Go from your experience of what you already know how to do. For instance, prior to this work, I had worked in healthcare as a healthcare educator and worked a lot with families and did a sort of form of mediation between patients and their physicians. And I always tried to gear the dialogue into a win-win scenario so the physician felt good about his direction and the patient felt good about their understanding. It wasn't until later that I realized that this was actually a formalized career and profession. So I was delighted to hear about that.
Wow. Okay. So I was going to ask you how you got there. So that's how you made the change from healthcare into full mediation. You're not doing healthcare anymore, right?
That is correct. Actually, there's a tiny bit of a segue. As I mentioned, I was in health education for many years. I also did a lot of work as a stress management expert and specialist, so the schools would have me come in and work with students who might be on the spectrum or who basically learned in their unique and special way, and then was asked to serve on the Los Angeles County Board of Education. And while I was serving my experience there, I was told by the president, wow, thank goodness you're here, you're our mediator. And so I asked him, what is that? And he said, well, you're advocating for us at the board, and you're making the population that's coming to see us very happy. How do you do that? And I just said, well, that's my nature. And they said, you should really think about being a mediator. So to be honest, I Googled it because I did not know what it is. And to be fair, I find myself to be a pretty informed person. So to not know what formally mediation was a surprise. And after researching it, I saw they had a program up at the law school at Loyola in downtown Los Angeles. And so I signed up for the course, realized I loved this work, and so just threw myself in full-hearted and embraced it as my next phase in life for work.
Is that a course or a certification, and how long does that cost? How long did that last?
That is a great question. So what I mentioned, Dispute Resolution Programs Act, is an agency that I can't exactly say formal certification because that's a different level, but right now there's professional training towards mediation. As I mentioned, there are people who go to law school and they may take courses in mediation and decide upon graduation that that's the avenue they want to go. Then there are individuals like myself and others who have master's degree or advanced degrees, maybe in conflict resolution. In my case, my undergrad was actually in international relations, which is diplomacy, and that's at the heart of a lot of what mediation is about. And then my master's in family and human development. And for those of us that are coming in that direction, we take several levels of courses. The minimum is 20 hours, 40 hours is preferred, and 80-plus hours is even better. Right now, there is an agency. I'm part of what's called the Southern California Mediation Association, and I'm a board member. And our organization is trying to craft a particular program in which we can obtain a certification level, and it is our hope to present that to the state of California so that it can kind of raise the bar, if you will, on the professionalism of mediation.
Now, a couple more questions.
Yes.
Now, at the heart of it, mediation really doesn't have to do with facts. It has to do with just getting the parties to agree and come together, whatever the facts are. Is that right?
That's a very good question. Being able to express how you see the situation is the way we like to term it when we're working with parties. Kind of a central theme in a mediation is trying to discover what are the needs and interests of each of the parties. A big piece of mediation, more than actually speaking, is listening. Being able to proactively listen to each side, allowing them space to share how they see the situation is more important than what, I'm going to say, quote, the facts are, because each party may see the situation in a particular way, and to them, those are the facts. So if we're able to get them into an informal, voluntary setting that they know is confidential, that's also the very important part of mediation, then they're in a safe space to be able to share how they see whatever is upsetting them, how it occurred, where is it coming from. I'll use family mediation as an example. most of the time these are family members that for some reason or other have had a disagreement. It's deep-rooted. But at the core of it all, it's still family. They're still going to continue to have a relationship at some level. And so mediation can provide them with a safe forum to be able to express their feelings in, like I said, a rather safe environment with somebody who's a third-party neutral. I have no vested interest. My only interest is try to find a place for them to come back together and to come up with creative solutions so that they can solve their own problems. And we're kind of there to support that process.
Are you on any kind of timeline? Are they on a timeline? I mean, I'm sure you don't want to drag things out. So how do you decide what kind of timeline you're on to make this happen?
Those are excellent questions, by the way. I have had the privilege and the luxury of mediating twofold. One, in some of my mediations, even the ones I've done on Zoom with regards to family mediation, I've been given several hours to discuss a particular topic. For instance, say it's child custody or spousal support. In family mediation, family law mediation, as you know, it's quite emotionally charged. You know, the couple is going through a divorce. They're trying to split assets. They're trying to split custody issues. There's, all kinds of reasons as to why that might have happened that have an emotional component to it. So sometimes in those situations, you need the first 20, 40 minutes to get the parties to just kind of get to a calmer place to be able to have a discussion. And sometimes what they need is just to have somebody to say, I hear you. And so that's where we provide the space with that. On the other hand, when I've worked in a court setting in which they get numerous cases over their desk, and they're really just trying to get some type of agreement to occur, even if it's just in one subject area, that tends to be a little bit more time sensitive. Because usually in a court day, there's the first session that ends, about 11:30, maybe noon. And so if you are working on one or two mediations, they do expect you to be done at that time so that the judge can stamp it, approve it, and move it on. And then in the afternoon, there's an additional 3 hours. So in those settings, there is a little bit more of a time prohibitiveness. But often, like in one of the cases I worked on today, we were allowed what's called a continuance because the parties were moving in a great direction. It's just we ran out of time. So the judge just rescheduled another day in which we can come back and continue the conversation. But when I worked in small claims, it was very fast. They expected us to go out and help the parties come to some kind of agreement, especially if it was a financial issue. Maybe a customer bought something from a merchant and it wasn't up to warranty, or they wanted their money back, or they wanted some kind of validation for the purchase. Those can go a little bit faster. But again, we try to allow enough time so that each party can have a bit of meeting of the minds with you, as you will, so that they feel like they came up with the solution. So part of our job is to kind of guide them.
So my last question, Lucia, is for anyone who may be looking at this as a career, or maybe even just stumbled upon this, what advice would you give to them with everything you've gone through throughout the years? What advice do you give to them to get into this career as a career?
Okay, great. The first thing I would say is do your homework and find a program that actually speaks to you. They're starting to have more and more programs that I'll say train, due to lack of better word, professionally train you as a mediator. But what I would strongly suggest is that you look for programs that are called DERPA supported. As I mentioned, that stands for Dispute Resolution Programs Act, because they have a particular standard that may be a little higher than just a mediation class at maybe a local, maybe just a local school or an online program, etc. Look for that initial, DERPA. Second, I would say network. Try to join, I'm going to toot for the Southern California Mediation Association, because we are a professional organization geared towards an individual who wants to be a trained professional in the art of mediation. You will meet individuals there at a variety of levels, attorneys who have decided to make this their career, community mediation, professionals who have found ways to get paid in the court system, volunteers who just decide they love this and this is the way they get back to the community, and many individuals who have started a private practice, which I did also for some time before, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic kind of turned everybody's private practices on their ear. What I would also suggest, too, is do a lot of homework with regards to the type of mediation you're interested in. One of the bumps that a lot of people, I think, have along the way is they try to reinvent the wheel. I know I mentioned this earlier. They decide, I think I'm going to be a mediator in employment disputes, but their background is in education. Or they, it just makes a lot of sense to fall into a field that you're already familiar with because you know the terminology, you know many of the players, and people will feel more comfortable hiring you as their mediator because you understand that particular arena and area of specialty. And then lastly, I would say put in your hours. If you start off volunteering, do as many mediations in a variety of levels as you can. There are a variety of excellent programs in San Diego, Orange County, Los Angeles, and here up in Kern that can help support that process. Even I did someone told me the other day, it was 88 to 100 volunteer hours. The time flies, though, because I enjoyed it so much I didn't even realize I had volunteered that much. Also, too, if you have an opportunity to work in mediation, I was fortunate, again, after the program up at Loyola Law School, they called me a few weeks later and asked me if I would come and work for them. And a lot of our mediation we did was for the community, working with populations where it would be very difficult for them to maybe hire or seek out an attorney. And we did a variety of mediations actually by phone. So we were able to do some problem solving and fairly quickly in that manner. But that's also where I was introduced into family law mediation because we were referred to by a lot of the courts like Chatsworth, Van Nuys, Torrance, etc., and couples were sent to us to help them with some of their paperwork, having conversations about income and expenses, as well as those custody issues.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience, and this is such a information-rich session here today. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me and asking about mediation, because knowledge is power. And part of my goal is hopefully more people will know about this profession and embrace it and help it to grow and grow. So thank you, Annalisa.
Thank you for listening. I hope you liked this episode. If you have a particular job you'd like me to look into, send me an email at workuniversityforyou@gmail.com. That's workuniversity, the number 4, the letter U, @gmail.com. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.